Okay. Good, we're good.
All right, well, we'll officially call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the review of the proposed amendment to the Irvington zoning code to create the multifamily office district.
So I was going to bring the members of the housing committee, who I know some are here. I was going to bring them up, into the video here so you can discuss this. That's what you're expecting, I think?
Yeah, sure.
Sounds good.
All right, hold on one second. Just give me a chance to do all that. Sorry, it's not a simple process. And do you think I have? I think I have everyone. If everyone's names are accurate. So I think I missed someone. Raise your hand, but I think I have everyone here. So, okay. Wait till everyone gets on here. There you go. Welcome, everyone. Okay, Brian, if you want to get going here.
Brian is muted.
Yeah, no, I know. He's having...
That's okay.
So I think, we've obviously been, going through this law for an extended period of time. And I don't know what the board's pleasure is in terms of what they'd like to talk about. I made a suggestion to the board that you talk a little bit on a higher level about, the longer range or the higher level goals of what we're trying to accomplish here with the part of this, the housing part of this zoning. And, certainly the housing committee obviously has been very supportive of affordable housing, fair and affordable housing as it's contained in our code. The Board of Trustees certainly has been supportive of that, but also, was looking at other income levels to try to address diversity in housing. So, I think that point probably needs to be discussed so that everyone's kind of on the same page and understands each side's goals here before we can really move forward. I mean, that's my take on it. I'm not trying to speak on behalf of the trustees, but just to get it started, those are my thoughts.
I certainly think it's a decent place as any to start. And I think, I guess I'll just start to get this ball rolling. But when we kind of slim down all of the uses to just multifamily housing in an effort to create some additional affordable housing stock, I think we kind of did that with the goal of making it a viable project for someone without, significant outside money or governmental money, being necessary to, having something done. So, if we're unable to find any developer that, wants to provide true affordable housing, we have someone that just wants to do market rate. What are some mechanisms we can create or can we put into the zoning that will create not just the 10% that we have to, but maybe, another equal amount, say another 10% or so that is kind of, kind of reduced market rate, for lack of a better term. So, not necessarily, affordable by the, the county's definition or, kind of maybe even the generally accepted definition, but just affordable for Irvington. Which, that's probably the biggest comment I get is, my wife and I both work, we have good jobs and we still can't stay here anymore because we just had our second child and we, can't stay in our, 1-bedroom co-op anymore. Or, the other side of the coin to the seniors that say, I'd love to stay, but I just can't afford paying $53,000 a year in taxes anymore. So, I think that was the thing that I was personally trying to solve. I think that our zoning would allow a large development of, more affordable housing. If someone wanted to come in and say, I want to build 65 units and I want them all to be 60%, adjusted income affordability, this would allow that. But it doesn't preclude someone coming in and saying, I just want to do a development. And then we say, okay, great. Well, we're still going to get, 6 affordable and maybe 5 or 6, kind of mid-market. And that was my whole vision of what we were trying to do here. So, that's I'll go first, and now I'll just be quiet for a few minutes and let anyone else talk about what we were trying to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we are trying to do that. I don't disagree. The question is, to me, what's doable when we don't own the property and a private developer has to agree to develop it. So obviously there are all kinds of incentives we're talking about, which ones matter, which ones don't. How do you make that work? We're struggling with something I don't know the answer to, but I also spoke long ago about the needs of seniors here in the village. Now I realize the idea of assisted living became unpopular. I wasn't against it per se, but I feel like there's a real opportunity to develop the angle of housing for seniors. So I'm glad that that's kind of surfaced in an active way now. Frankly, I think from what I've read about it and tried to investigate, there's more than just, have an elevator on one floor. There are ways of having, the construction is different where the edges of things are not as sharp, and there are ways that make it more practical for people who might fall. So all that we could do in that direction, I think is commendable. And I also think it reduces some of the issues that people will obviously have about a lot of traffic at the time of, well, I know we're going to, whatever happens, we will require that a developer control the traffic issues. But I think it's important to think about the consideration that seniors wouldn't be leaving at 8 in the morning and coming back at 6 at night. So, maybe that's not as much clarity as we're really looking for, but those are my thoughts at the moment.
Well, I would just add that, in our effort to determine a definition of moderate income housing, we've been using the information that were supplied to us by Patrick through Marianne, and he gave a fairly cogent argument. I mean, the numbers that he showed, unless shown otherwise, seem to make sense. And that's sort of, we use that as sort of our starting point in terms of determining definitions of moderate income. I think we've certainly have come around to understanding that 150% is not something that, is really going to be considered to be moderate. But again, given the constraints, we're not precluding a developer coming in with outside, grant and funding and building, a significant affordable with a small A unit, but we need to figure out a way to have a balance in what can be built and what can be attractive enough to a private developer.
Janice, you're on mute.
I'm really just joining the chorus here, but we don't own this land. Somebody's going to buy it, and we have to figure out a way to establish incentives to achieve our goal, which is of making it more affordable. That is, we have a certain number of guaranteed units that will have to be affordable according to our village code. But after that, it's really a balance. how much can we incentivize? I hate that word, but what kind of incentives can we offer that are going to be, frankly, worth it to a developer? And if we try to squeeze it too hard, we're going to wind up only with the number that's within our code. Would we like to have units available for lower income people? Sure. But can we realistically achieve that? I'm thinking of that phrase, don't let the perfect get in the way of the possible. What can we realistically achieve here? I would like to have more younger people not have to move away from their hometown because they can't afford to start a house. I would like, as everybody else has said, more realistic options available for seniors so they can stay here and not pay $50,000 a year taxes. But we're operating on a fairly narrow lane road here. I don't mean that literally. We don't only, but so withdraw. Get off the roads. But you know what I'm trying to say. I think there's only but so much, and if we are all like starry-eyed, well, we're going to make big incentives if they build like really, really affordable. We're going to wind up with none. So I would like us to work together to explore the options and come up with what is feasible and attractive to developers as well as buyers.
So with that, the question that's been on my mind, and that's why I kind of teed up the conversation. But the question is, let's understand clearly where the housing committee believes the board should be. You know what I mean, and see where we all are here, and try to come up with with something that can work for both sides, and so that we can all get behind this one goal. That's really what my focus is just understanding, what the housing committee would like to see in terms of zoning, the housing aspect of this zoning in particular, and see if we can reconcile that with where the board is, and what the draft says and all that. So anyway, that's my question.
Well, I would just add one other piece to an addendum. I don't think it's any surprise since I've spoken about this for years, but the incentives related to historic structures, including the historic stone wall, all is important to me, and that's an incentive I think the community would surely support, because there's such a sense of community with the look of that area of Irvington that, I don't know, we call it the Northern Gateway.
Well, I guess I've been elected speaker of the committee for this evening, so I'll speak. I think, we've done a fair amount of research here. And I think the feeling with the original proposal was that when it was at 120 to 150% AMI with no differentiation between for sale and rental properties, that was really kind of a giveaway. And I spoke with Rose about where the greatest needs lie in the community, and trying to keep in mind also that it is private property, and that the village really doesn't have any right to prevent the owners from, achieving the highest and best use. So it really is a balancing act. And I went in and I took a look pretty closely at Patrick's numbers earlier today. And, obviously his assumptions about operating expenses could be off. They could be perfectly fine. I don't really know. That plays into it. But his break-even point was kind of at around the 2-bedroom unit at 120%. And anything underneath that, he'd be losing money, or the developer would be losing money. So, but my feeling is that if you're allowing developers to get additional units for providing some at rates where they are losing money, then that kind of makes them whole, because they're earning more money. They're earning the money on the additional unit that they wouldn't have to offset the unit on which they are losing money. So I'm not too worried if, there's a couple of units where they're they're either breaking even or losing some money if they've been given the opportunity to build additional market rate. And looking at what the break-even point was, let's see. Let me find my paper here. No, I have too many. Yeah, so he had a range of operating expenses per month per apartment. His low end of the range was $3,207 a month, and the high end was $3,743. So he'd have to be charging rents higher than that to be making any money on the rental income. And then I took a look at the list of apartments that Rose sent us for the December meeting, which included the market rate rents for various complexes that also had affordable housing included. But the market rates for, say, the Danforth and Dobbs Ferry, which is not nearly as nice an area, I would say, for 2-bedroom, 2-bath, they were getting $4,300 a month, 37 to 4,300. The Sawmill Lofts, which are also, they're Hastings, but they're, along the Sawmill near Ardsley, they're getting on a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, anywhere from $3,995 to $4,995. So basically, 39 Washington Lofts in Pleasantville, which is a downtown kind of cool urban loft building. They've got 23 units, 2 are affordable at 60% AMI. So they obviously were not offering density bonuses, but their market rent 2-bedroom is $4,200 a month. And at Chappaqua Crossing, which is the bigger, it's a bigger complex, but they're offering 3 bedrooms at $4,800 a month. So I think the point of that is market rents in Westchester are really high, and they're well above kind of the break-even point at his level of operating expenses. So by giving him the opportunity, him, her, the developer, more opportunity to build more units, I think that offsets, the units on which they're going to lose some money on. And I think that's the point of a density bonus. So does that make sense?
So let me just say one thing. First of all, it makes perfect sense. And what the challenge in all of this is that the lower you go in terms of income level that you're going to allow, or that you're going to require, the incentive level. So the 120 we've been talking about, or 150, 100, or whatever it is, the lower you go, the more market rate units you need to offer. And it's probably not a straight line scale either. I'd have to look at it. But the point is that then now you start bumping into density levels that make the Board of Trustees uncomfortable. I think, they could say it themselves, but I think that's the case. So, and that's come out in previous conversations. So that's the balance. We just framed the problem here. And so, the reason that the board took the approach of at least getting something, as the mayor said before, at least getting something besides just market rate. You'll have your affordables that are required, but something more than something in between. That was kind of the scaled back goal. I think everyone kind of tends to agree that the 150 probably doesn't need to be incentivized. So that's, they've said that a few times in previous meetings. So, but the other levels, that's where we really need to look at. Is it worth offering incentives at those other levels to get the possibility of housing in the middle?
They're clearly going to be losing money at 100% of AMI.
Well, it seemed that way to us. I don't know if that, at least the numbers we were looking at, so I don't know if there's any differing opinions on that, but just on a real simple smell test from our side, the numbers seem pretty reasonable, that were presented by the developer that Mary Ann contacted.
And you ran and past somebody else, right, Larry?
Me? Oh, I did speak to Ed, yeah. And without going into a full scale analysis of it, he felt that the numbers were reasonable, the development costs and they seemed reasonable. He thought units that were aimed at 120% of AMI would be very hard to squeeze any profit out of. So that, to me, that's another way of saying break even, right?
Yeah.
We're certainly willing to consider any possible way of doing this to maximize the number of affordables. One possibility, I do not know how feasible this is to do, but to allow just smaller size apartments in the same footprint. So if you could fit 3 market rate apartments, maybe you could fit 4 affordables or a 4th apartment. So you're not increasing the coverage, but that might be an incentive to just build it a little bit differently.
Janice, are you talking
We
about
can consider
affordable and moderate income? Janice?
Oh, I'm sorry, not affordable, not affordable according to our code, more moderate.
The moderate income, okay, because we already have that with the affordable.
So I was looking back in my notes today, and I noticed that that's what we did with Donardo. That's why we got 6 affordable
Yeah.
units from Donardo, because we allowed them to make them smaller. So instead of 3, we
Exactly.
got 6.
Yeah, that was a change I recommended to the code. That's not in the model ordinance, was not in the county model ordinance. But it seemed to me, and it may not have needed to be in it because the model wasn't for places. I mean, Irvington's buildings just happened to have really very big apartments, that particular proposal. A regular proposal might not, but that one did. So then it seemed that made more sense. And it's in addition to getting more affordable units, those big ones wouldn't have been affordable, too much to maintain.
No. I also was looking around at some of the other some of the other recent developments that had affordable components. So I came across one in Armonk that was built last year. Again, I don't think there were any density bonuses, but it's a 16, it's smallish. So I was looking for small sized developments. 470 Main Street, Armonk, it has 16 residential units, condominium, and 1 commercial. And they were offering 2 fair and affordable housing condominiums for people earning up to 80% AMI. So there seem to be a lot of municipalities that are able to make it work. With the 80%.
Deb, I researched that a lot, in addition to which Tom Thacker sent me something from Tiffany today to say, look at these communities. And I looked at every one of those communities. And it was not the model that the bill, it wasn't aiming at what the board is aiming at here. It was all those density bonuses were truly affordable. So it's affordable house, affordable with a capital A. So they were different. They really were different schemes. And that's why they would have been aimed at 80%. And they were pretty significant bonuses that would bring the density up to, I think, more than the board would feel comfortable with, for reasons of, traffic, and that you're definitely going to have school generation from the affordables. I mean, one thing, you guys came a little bit, and I'm not blaming you, but you just came onto this a little bit late. The way we got to these numbers, the density, it started out as much higher because the general density factor for multifamily in the village is 5,000. And we were figuring out how many units, and the board said to me, well, how might we get more affordable? And I said, well, allow more of them, make the density factor smaller. So this density factor, we have a 3,000, is significantly smaller than it is otherwise. And then working with those numbers and then putting the bonus on, we got to a point where the board was comfortable with the maximum number of units that would be developed, both in terms of coverage and in terms of traffic generation and in terms of school generation. So these affordable bonuses that I looked at, where you can have one affordable for every market rate, would bring it up to numbers that, not only the board's the village wouldn't be comfortable with. You're talking about the impacts are too great.
Right, so in the most recent proposal, have you taken out that tiered approach where you gave 1:1 and also 1.5:1?
Well, no, the new one is, I mean, oh, you didn't look at it. The new one's
No,
totally different. It has a distinction for,
sale and-
but it's just for discussion, I just threw it out because these were things I had heard, would be that it would be aimed at 100% AMI for rentals and 120% AMI for 120% AMI for sale
Sale.
units.
Mhm.
And the 150 was out, so
Right.
so that wouldn't be tiered. I mean, it's so that tonight is the first time we'll be discussing that.
But both generate for one unit at either of these two levels, depending on whether it's for sale or rent, the builder would be allowed to add 1 unit of market rate
That's the way it's drafted now.
up to 20% or whatever.
Right, a maximum of 20% over, yeah.
Okay. And is 166 units over the 4 properties, that includes all of the density bonuses possible, or it does not?
Hold on, I lost track of that.
3,000.
But anyway, you got to remember that that's a pretty, it's very unlikely that's going to happen, that all 4 are going to be developed as multifamily. Wait a minute, let me get my charts.
No, I'm just trying to get a sense of how big.
Maximum units with the bonus would be, I gotta add them up here, 134, 150, 165.
With bonus, okay.
That would be with the bonus. Wait, 66, 134, 150, 165, yeah. That's, but that assumes that, you know, quite a few units, the units in the 2 smaller properties would be pretty small. So they may well not end up with that many units, even if they were built out.
Right, so those, you know, are 15
I
and
think the
16.
most significant ones would be at the Maxon one, maxed out, you know, depending on what the board decides on the FAR, what should be the maximum FAR would be something like 66 and oh, no, this has nothing to do with it because this is based on site capacity. So for the Maxon property, it'd be 66 if you include the moderate income bonus, and the old Carafiello property would be 68.
How about historic preservation bonuses and such? Does
Yeah,
that
that does not take in, well, the Maxon one takes into account maintaining, the way it's drafted now, it takes into account maintaining the mansion. The Carafiello one doesn't take into account those houses. It's not a lot, so it might be a little bit, you know, it might be a little bit more than that, but percentage-wise, it's not going to be a lot more.
So can I ask a quick question, Mary Ann? I believe I have the current version of the working draft. I don't see any differentiation under density bonus for providing moderate income units. Letter A. There's no differentiation between rentals or sales, right? Currently.
there is?
Wait a minute.
Tom, what section are you looking at?
I'm looking at section.
On page 16, you know what? Wait a minute.
Yeah, I'm looking at page 16, 224-213A, and there is no differentiation.
No. What the differentiation is, well, first of all, this is not worked out. I mean, I hope it's a working draft.
Yeah.
But this is the first time that I had made that differentiation, and you can see it in the definition between what's moderate income for purchase and what's moderate income for rental.
In the
Okay.
definition.
And then I don't think the bonus, I mean, I don't think that the bonus would have to differentiate between the two. No, you're right. There isn't a differentiation in the density bonus, but I don't unless the board, I mean, we'll talk about it, but I don't see off the top of my head why it would be different.
It's 1-to-1, right?
1-to-1 for both rental and for sale.
Oh, I see, I see.
But the for sale would be at 120% AMI and the rental at 100%.
I threw that out. Just to understand, none of this is settled. This is what we were going to discuss tonight. But as Larry pointed out, we should get an idea of overall the direction we're headed in before we start getting into the details here. But
Okay, yeah, I'm just somewhere. I mean, Rose had said, where? I don't know. Let me go look for this. Somebody else can speak while I look for this piece of
So
computer.
Marianne, I just want to confirm, we also don't have any fixed size requirements as for big A affordable or moderate
no,
versus, I mean, for little a moderate versus big A, which has definite size requirements.
yeah.
Mhm.
Because, and I think we actually talked about that a little bit and decided not to be. I mean, because they're going to be marketing them at a decent. Well, no, they've got to be the same as the market rate as it is now.
The same size?
I
thought
think so. Hold on a
we
minute.
talked about that might be a unnecessary requirement.
Wait, hold on. No, I think, it's been. Hold on a minute.
My recollection was that we felt that even for the moderate units, the market would be driving what was an acceptable size. If
Yeah.
they made them too small, they would just not be interested. And part of that is because if you keep the same FAR, but then increase the number of units, obviously something has to get smaller.
Mhm.
All right.
So the lot coverage determines how big the overall building can be, whereas the FAR determines.
Well, you know what, Deb, it depends on the lot. Actually, on the Carafiello property, it's whichever is the lower of the two numbers, the more restrictive of the two numbers is as big as you can be. On the Carafiello property, it's their coverage that's limiting. And on the Maxon property, it's their FAR that's limiting. And it's just because one of the properties has a huge amount of resource protection deductions and the other one doesn't. So they end up with the same, what do you call it? I forget what that column's called, the net buildable site area. Is even though the Carafiello lot's much bigger, they have almost the same net buildable site area.
Which is why they have almost the same number of units. I get it.
Exactly.
Okay,
Okay.
well,
So do you think we're ready to go start the discussion of the actual text? I mean, are you guys bored?
So could I just say one short thing, which is look, I respect what the board's was trying to do before we came on board, so to speak, and respect what you're continuing to try to do. And I think really the question is what is really kind of the sweet spot or the right number, right?
Yeah.
And I think that even the developer, Marianne, who provided the numbers, which, according to Deb, those numbers, sound like they're a little low in terms of what he thought about the maximum rent. But he also said in the document that 120% is close to the break-even point. And so I guess the question that I would ask the board is, why would there be a density bonus unless essentially you're allowing somebody to build one market rate unit in order to subsidize a unit that's below market rate? if you're subsidizing something that's going to be about break even, then that really works to the developer's benefit, right? Because they're developing a market rate unit, and then they have one that isn't making a lot of money, but they were able to build one more market rate unit. So I think that, that's the issue at hand, and the one that, a number of us have been researching in different ways. And Marianne, I appreciate that you did the research that I was going to do on my own after today. But I think that that's really kind of the question at hand, is kind of establishing where that number is. And I did also note to you in the email that I think that the village would find itself in a very odd place if somebody took the density bonus and were to build 12 new units, because then one of those units, according to the village code for affordable housing, would have to be an affordable unit, because that would increase the amount, and you would have over 10 more units. And so, because our code says 10% of all the units have to be affordable. So that's going to have to be worked out in the language somehow.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But
it does go. What?
Go ahead, Marianne.
No, I was just going to say, but that goes to, if they're going to have to do one more affordable in order to get that also cuts into the profit, which is fine.
Right.
If in fact they're barely breaking even or just breaking even, and they also have to provide that, I think it seems like a fair balance dollar wise.
But if developer is not going to build something that breaks even because there's no return on investment, so there needs to be some incentive. Whether it has to be 1-for-1 is debatable, certainly.
Right.
But there's got to be a mechanism for having a return, otherwise it doesn't get done.
Right, they're not going to build the break-even units, because that's taking away a unit where they could have been making some money.
Right, it's capital that's not returning anything, so.
Right. So according to what Tom said, that Sadie and Tiffany had both said, incentives should be for units at 80 to 100% of AMI. So for the rental units, you're within that. I mean, you're at the upper range, but if you wanted to tier it down and offer bigger incentive for building at 80% and a smaller incentive for building at 100%, I mean, I think that sounds reasonable, similar to the way it was in the first proposal, but just ratcheted down considerably. And the for sale, I mean, apparently for sale, there's a huge demand for home ownership properties up to 150% of AMI. So I think 120% of AMI is probably, conservative and workable. I don't know what, we figure out what that would cost. No, we really only looked at rents, I think. And Patrick had only looked at rents. But according to the housing needs assessment, I mean, the level of for sale, the prices of for sale properties in Irvington are just way out of line with the incomes of people who are looking to purchase for the most part. So I think 120% in the for sale arena is reasonable as well. How does everybody else feel?
I tend to agree with that.
Yeah, so maybe the only thing I would say we could explore, and I assume, digging deep back into the recesses of my mind from when I was in business school, I mean, there are formulas, there are ways you can figure out exactly what you need to, kind of that balance between incentive and discount and market rate to get to the optimal mix of units. But if we offered 80% density bonus, 100% density bonus on the rental side, 120% density bonus on the for sale side, I think that would make everybody pretty happy. And we still had the 10% mandate at 60%, right? That's what the model ordinance is.
It's 60, 80, 60 for rental, 80 for sale. No.
Okay.
Could I make a comment and a question?
Yes.
Deb, I agree with you completely on that, particularly if, our stated goal is to do something for young people who want to stay in the village and can't afford to live, starter home, whatever you want to call it, and likewise for retirees. Doing it for sale doesn't really accomplish that goal. Those are people who are trying to save money to reduce all their costs, and that's not to make a financial investment in a home. Rental is what's really going to make it affordable for our target audience that we would like to have in the village. Not to mention to have any diversity in the village. So incentivizing more for rental as for purchase, I think is potentially critical to our goal. That said, also, all of these numbers, as Marianne clearly points out, and cost depend upon the net buildable area, whether we're calling that FAR, lot coverage, however it works out. The more you can build on a given lot that costs 4 million or whatever it costs, the less per unit cost that is. I likewise, on the concept of a developer's profit, it's sort of it's just like the retail business. It's you buy 10 hats and you want to sell them. It doesn't matter what you sell the first couple for. What matters is what you sell the last one for. Your profit is in the end. So if you can take the project and add 1, 2, 3 units to what your total costs are, all your development costs are already paid for. So those last few units costs the developer significantly less to build than the first few units. So just that is an incentive for them to go for a bonus. They will make more money off of it, and the supplement that they have to pay for the affordable will be more easily covered with extra units to the standard whatever. So to that goal, Marianne, you mentioned that you proposed density on this latest plan and on previous plans and have done your homework well on that. But you clarified that all with, you felt you were doing it to what the board would feel comfortable with and not going above a density that the board, the village, was uncomfortable with. And I just wonder if maybe we need to look at this project as our last chance to do anything affordable of any size in this village at all. There's no other properties other than the Abbott House and what's above this, but in this other than this area to do this with, that maybe we should be a little more on the edge of what we're comfortable with for FAR for this project than we might be for some smaller something somewhere else in the village.
David, just so you understand, the comfort wasn't, there was a certain amount on talking about how big the building would be, but I think the main thing they were looking at when they was the impact, looking at the student generation rate and the traffic generation rate. We had the maximum amount of traffic at the peak AM hour and the peak PM hour, and looked at those numbers, and when it got beyond where it was, there was more concern.
Well, I thought we had heard from Michael that the student generation wasn't even an issue with the last proposal that was looked at your last board meeting. There was some discussion upon that, and that was being exaggerated by the naysayers.
Yeah, it may well be exaggerated, but traffic, I think probably the school generation numbers usually are, but often, I mean, sometimes they're not. And probably my guess would be that if you did have more moderate income and the more moderate and affordable you have, probably the higher student generation you're going to get. But it was, I would say it was more the traffic. The
Okay.
traffic
And maybe
numbers.
that's a reason for more 2 bedrooms rather than 3 bedroom units. That reduces that. And could I throw just one side thing on the edge of this? If we're doing anything on the Maxim site or whatever we're calling it, we should look at the Strawberry Lane roadway. And if there is ever any chance of doing anything further up the hill or any development being planned up there that's increasing traffic going up Strawberry Lane, it would certainly be nice to be able to widen Strawberry Lane. And now on this property with this sale would be the only chance to do that. And if that's not put in as part of the give back, we'll never have another chance to make the entry and exit onto Strawberry Lane something more reasonable. And that could have significant traffic impacts further down the road. So that's an aside to be considered. Thank you.
So the one thing that Dave touched on is, the board spent a fair amount of time in the beginning of this process and probably in the middle as well, looking at the densities of, similar type developments, similar multifamily developments. And so the densities that they've landed on are not just based on traffic, they certainly are, but also, looking at the densities of existing developments.
Right.
So, so that's partly where it came from. Again,
Yeah, that's a good point, Larry, because the density, this density is very similar to the density of the other multifamily in the village, which are at a much higher lower density factor than the code has in the MF district, because they all preceded that. Or most of them preceded that. Yeah, that's a good point, Larry. I forgot.
And also the provision regarding Strawberry Lane is still in there in terms of the special permit. So
Yeah, I was just gonna find that. Hold on.
I have it in front of me on a different screen if you want to read it.
But no, I've got it right here. It's something about if any development on Strawberry Lane, wait a minute. No special permit, because everything here is a special permit use, may be issued for use using Strawberry Lane for access or egress, unless the applicant makes whatever improvements are necessary to ensure and maintain safe passage over Strawberry Lane from Broadway to the point on Strawberry Lane where the use has access or egress. Did you hear that, David?
Yeah, I hear that, but the problem will be that the Abbott House and the other property up there, they may want to do something that may increase traffic very legitimately with whatever they do, and they will have no leverage over the Maxon property, which what needs to be done with Strawberry Lane is it needs to have 3 lanes right there at the bottom of the hill. So you got to take out another 15 feet of the Maxon property in order to do that.
Oh, and that's a stone wall, isn't it?
Yeah, you have to rebuild the stone wall and reconstruct it.
That's true.
Otherwise it's going to be forever a traffic issue there.
It's very steep also, isn't it? I've never actually been up Strawberry Lane, but it looks treacherous
It is.
from an angle viewpoint as well as turning.
Also, the village doesn't own it.
Right.
Not a road. It's not our public road. Yeah.
All that said, I'm just saying, if you look at that and then, down the road, you're not going to have a chance to deal with that.
Well, I think the result of what Marianne read would be that there would be a turn lane at the bottom. There would be an enhancement at the bottom. It just wouldn't necessarily go all the way up to the, to the top of Strawberry Lane.
Yeah, but from what correct me if I'm wrong, Marianne, but from what you're suggesting, that's only for the Maxon property to do or not do. The Abbott property house
The
couldn't.
Abbott House
just
isn't
do
in the
that.
district anymore. At the time when this was first written, Abbott House was part of the rezoning, and it would have applied to them, but they're not part of the rezoning now.
But I think what David's trying to say is that the capacity required for some future development of the Abbott House property is probably greater than what would be required for just the Maxon property. And at that point, there'd be no further opportunity to make those improvements.
But you can't put that on the Maxon property
No.
And
to
since it's
improve for some future unknown traffic.
a private road, you can't even do it as the village.
It's not our road.
And the capacity of the road as it is, post Maxon owner developer improvement would no matter what, would set a limit to what Abbott House would be able to do, because they have to, conform to traffic pattern regulations that exist. If they come later, well, the situation is, as it is when they've come.
Yeah, Abbott House is not an easy property to develop. They have virtually no frontage. They have frontage on Riverview Road a little bit, right? And then they have this private road that we don't even know who owns it. So that's hardly frontage. So it's hard to develop a property without frontage. So,
Helicopter.
Okay, if you guys feel there's nothing to worry about, okay.
well, I think we can only control. what we can control.
Everything is an issue to worry about for sure, David, really. That's why we're like,
Well, I mean,
Exactly.
honestly, the traffic situation is going to be, on Broadway is going to be a problem for these 4 properties, because the first property that comes has got the biggest trough to work in, and will set new constraints on, upping traffic levels on Broadway. So the next property will have a much harder window or needle to thread. And, so it's basically, it is, I guess you could call it the tragedy of the commons. I don't know, but it's whoever's up first is going to get the best net result. And later development is going to be further constrained by traffic.
well,
Well, that's why I think Mary Ann's comment is correct. I'm not sure that the other 2 properties are even going to be considered for multiple housing because of those issues.
On the other hand, they are small and generate much smaller in terms of, 16 units, 18 units or something?
Yeah, and they'd be pretty small units. I mean, that's what the site capacity gives them, but they'd end up being very small units. So they may well not go that high, but.
so could I clarify one thing? And the issue of break even, which as some people have now spoken is not what a developer is looking for. They're not looking to just break even, obviously, but does the housing committee come down as a committee where Deb was kind of explaining the possible point of view that 120, let's see if I get one, my message.
She's saying 120 for sale and 80
For
to 100
sale,
for rental.
yeah. And is that what the housing committee is proposing in general, or is that?
Or agreeing to, you mean?
I mean, is that, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Deb. I'm just trying to say that, we don't have a sure sense here. I mean, as Mary Ann said, we were kind of comfortable with this and then we changed to that, but well, I guess let me break it down a little bit. Does everybody agree that that is the number that is essentially viewed by developers as the break-even number?
Well, Connie, we don't really know. I mean, we spoke with the one developer, and Larry bounced those numbers off, Ed, just
Yeah,
to see if
right.
they made sense to him. I had hoped Tom could ask Wilder Balter. I mean, but because actually, I was thinking about asking them in the beginning, because I knew they developed affordable. If people aren't comfortable, run it past another developer. But
Yeah.
but like a developer who's familiar, who's developed, affordable stuff.
Well, I was trying to read through Tiffany's information that Tom,
Yeah, but that's where,
that's not from a different point of view, right?
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, and I think that's what Larry was trying to get at the beginning, and now it's all perfectly valid. But that's how you encourage really affordable housing. I mean, and for a lot of to Irvington, this is really going to seem affordable. The rent's probably any other part of the country people would think was very high, but yeah.
So can I was in touch with Bill Balter, and he did request that I send the zoning language to him, and I was waiting until this meeting actually was over because I thought maybe some decisions were going to be made about the shape of the language. But I'm happy to reach out to him tomorrow, and he said that he would put one of his people on it to take a look at this.
Well, it would be very helpful to have another developer take a look and either say, hey, you guys are, all off, or yeah, that's about right.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Expect that
right. The situation here, the cost, the situation, the all blah, blah, blah. And yeah, just that would help me a bit.
But Tom, why don't you wait till the board, I mean, they may tell me they want things changed tonight, and I'll do it in the next card. If they want changes tonight, I'll do them, probably tomorrow or Friday. So why don't you wait?
I will. I'll wait until early next week.
Well, if it's okay with the board, I'll send I'll copy the next draft to Tom for him to run past. Okay.
Yeah, but I would say, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here for the housing committee, but I think that I believe our consensus is we'd like to, as I think the board would too, we'd like to find that number that's as low as possible that would incentivize the creation of additional units, but that would not result in a developer saying, you're crazy, I'm not going to create any more units, period. And so we've kind of thrown out the baby with the bathwater, right? So, yeah.
Join the club.
The formal term for what you're describing is
the housing keeping. That's what where the board's at too, and that's the number we were trying to get at.
I think, two things come to mind. One is that I think the break-even point for home ownership properties is possibly different than rental properties. I don't know, but I didn't have any for sale numbers to work through, so I don't think we can necessarily make that assumption. And the other is that we can look at what other municipalities have on their books in terms of density bonuses, but unless they're being used, it doesn't matter.
There isn't another municipality that's doing this. This is, I mean, is it? I look. There's workforce housing, but that's a different animal. I mean, there could be someplace in the world, but certainly not in New York, and I researched somewhat broader than that because I know California and Washington often have good luck. It might be something out there, but you're not going to find it in Westchester. I don't think. If you do, it'd be great, but let me know. But I haven't been able to find it. And in fact, when I talked to Patrick, he also did, and he's all over. He didn't know of any either. He sent me something that was in Tuckahoe, but Tuckahoe was workforce, which is quite a bit different. And then something from another municipality, but it was not nearly as thought out as this was. So, as this. But if you find anything, great. But I think that's one of the I mean, that's been a real challenge. Because if somebody else did it, it's easy to write something up and come up with provision. But
So, there's a question that I don't, naively, I don't think I understand this, but I'll ask it and sound naive. It's all right. So if you incentivize the protection of historic structures and it's not an attractive incentive, that it's more incentivizing to just have the space that those buildings took up, can that happen? You know, you've offered an incentive, but they'd rather tear down a building and have the space. Yes?
yeah, they might. It might get in the way of what they have planned. Yeah, it's a real possibility. I mean, I think it's you take a property like the Carafiello property, maybe it's not as much of an issue. It could be because
They're
they're
small and they're, yeah.
scattered on the edges of the property where they wouldn't be able to build something anyway because they're in the setbacks.
Yeah, right.
Property like Maxon, it might be a bigger challenge because the old building is like not right in the middle, but it's certainly in the developable area. Yeah, I mean, you can.
So when incentives aren't necessarily incentives, you know, you can say,
Well,
here
they
it is.
are.
And they're,
Well, they're not
You
guaranteed.
don't
Yeah,
have to
right.
take
Yeah.
incentives.
what's an incentive to me is not an incentive to you.
Right, right. Not a guarantee.
Or
Right.
it might be an incentive, but not
Enough.
not enough to, if it gets in the way of whatever your development plan is,
Oh, I'd like to ask something else about the inclusion of senior housing, and I think there's a definition.
Yeah.
But is that something that you took from sort of industry standards, the definition of senior housing? Or, because I know that there are multiple, there's assisted living, but then there's age restricted and there's active adult and there's
Yeah, that's
5 different types. And I don't know if we're specifying one type at the exclusion of
Well,
some of the other types, or you just were trying to exclude
No,
assisted
we were
living.
that was something we were going to discuss tonight. Do you want it to find more tightly than that, or do you just want housing for older people? Once you get into regulating, it gets really very strict. But well, anyway, are we done with? Should we go back? Should we go to the draft? Because actually, I had. It seemed to me that there were 3 main things to discuss. One was the senior citizen and permitting greater density, and the other things we were doing. Second was permitting bigger buildings as part of this density bonus, because we talked a little bit about it before. And third, the whole moderate income housing thing. There's a bunch of questions in there. So you think we're ready to discuss the senior housing thing?
Might as well, I think.
Okay. So the way I did only minimal stuff on the senior housing because I wanted to find out what direction you guys wanted to go in. And I'll tell you what this draft does with it has senior citizen housing as just, age restricted housing to people over 62. My thinking on that is, let me jump forward on that. Then you'll also see further on in the code, instead of a density factor of 3,000, give it a density factor of 2,000, which means you could have 50% more of those units than you would of, regular non-restricted housing. So for instance, on the maximum on the Maxon property, the way it's drafted now, would be 66 units. Oh no, that's with the bonus. Would be 56 units. And then, but with the senior housing, at 2,000, it would be 85 units. So it's 50% more units. But it probably wouldn't end up being a bigger building because the apartments can be smaller. And I showed Ashley Lai, who's the planner that we've consulted occasionally on this, whether that average size made sense. And she thought, yes, it did make sense, and they would be actually, reasonably sized, even a little generous apartments. Okay. So and then also there's 0 student generation, and probably significantly less traffic generation, because you're going to have a lot more retired people, and at least not traffic going out at the morning rush and the evening rushes. So it's not unreasonable, I would think. That's my idea, to permit 50% more of that. And the apartment sizes, as I said, it comes out with a reasonable size. The other change it's made is in the parking spaces.
I saw that, yeah.
Instead of right now, it's got 1.5. The draft has 1.5 parking spaces per multifamily unit, and it would be just one for a senior unit. So those were like the main things. Now the question is whether you want to put, conditions on it, like, do you want the board monitoring it? That's why I sent you some of the stuff from I think it was Rye Brook, and it had certain conditions on there, about the person has to live there full time, it has to be the main residence, stuff like that. It doesn't have anything about bigger hallways or, stuff like that. But you have to assume it, if a developer's building for 62 plus, they're going to put that stuff in. Otherwise, it's not going to be attractive to them. And so that's why it seemed to me you could just do it the simpler way. And what did I find this stuff in other codes? No, because where they have senior housing, they have senior housing floating districts. They're different, and they almost always involve the continuum of living, which this board made clear they don't want to have. They don't want to have the assisted living and then beyond that. So it clarifies that senior citizen housing doesn't offer additional services to residents such as medical care, personal assistance, or meals. It's just age restricted units occupied by at least one adult age 62 or over. Sometimes it's 55, but 62 and over seem to me,
62 seems pretty young to
55,
me.
you're still a kid, 62, you're still a kid.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
You could have children in these units.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't see the village police. I mean, you're probably not going to have many kids, but I sort of don't like the idea of a lot of regulations, because you don't want to be policing it. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, you do want to make sure that it's only used for seniors. So you may need somebody like Larry, the person that administers the affordable, whoever we have administer the affordable housing, would they be able to do something like that, like require reporting of who lives there? Because you wouldn't want them to say, yeah, it's for 62 and older, and then the 62-year-old buys it and sells it to somebody who's, much younger. You want some control over it. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that like the Housing Action Council does for affordable projects. And I think they do others for workforce projects as well. They do other compliance type work. I don't think that's much of an issue. I think
that you'd be able to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you
We
pay someone
wouldn't
to
do it ourselves. We would find.
No,
group like
we
that.
don't have a,
But you do have to make sure that it continues as
Right.
the senior housing. So anyway, so that's, and I'll get into some conditions, but just throwing that out there, how do you feel about that?
I'm not sure I'm comfortable with 50% more, but that's a discussion to be had. And then the other thing you sent around was, you mentioned, I think you said looking at H through K of that, of the thing from the other municipality. I'm blanking now where it came from.
Rye Brook.
Yeah, Rye Brook, that's right. And some of those were useful, but again, they were very regulatory in terms of you know, ensuring that the continued use of the space was for seniors, and it didn't seem to allow for younger. It didn't say that everyone had to be 62 or older in the apartment or
No.
in
No,
the.
no, one person has to be 62 or older. That's our definition of it.
But other
Um,
places
right,
do
But in
require.
terms of the regulatory, that's what I was just talking to Larry about. Is there somebody we can get to do that? Because you do need some someone to make sure that, because these people are getting way more units. So you have to make sure that the units are in fact being used by at least one person 62 and over. So that's what Larry was saying. He thought Housing Action Council could supervise something like that. And that's what, those were the things in the Rybrook, yeah, yeah, it says all, I mean, but Mark, you don't have to take these things word for word. We would make them fit to.
No, I was just wondering if I had misread, because I didn't see that it said only one, at least one. I thought it looked
Well,
like.
it doesn't matter. It says all dwelling units shall be occupied by senior citizens of at least 62 years of age. We would make it say that all dwelling units shall be occupied by at least one person of 62. I'm not suggesting taking these word for word, but incorporating those ideas into this.
Well, fine. I was just making sure I had remembered what I read correctly. I'm
Yeah.
not in favor of the super restrictive reading. I think that you have to allow mixed age in terms of who might be in the building or in the unit, although ownership may be restricted to senior level.
Right. So Mary Ann, in that you said you were using an example, fixed 56 units. If you got 50% more because you were senior, it would be, then there'd be 85 units, but the total amount of building would not be 50% more because each unit would be smaller.
That's the thinking.
So that's good thinking in my sense, because, in terms of the bulk on that property, begins to be a problem. But if each place is smaller,
Yeah.
so then there's something pretty attractive about that to me.
Right. And if they want to, they don't need to build 85. I mean, maybe they only want to build 70 because they want to make them a little bit bigger.
Mary Ann, I'm liking your thinking on this. My one question is, were you thinking that the board would like it to be, this could potentially be 100% senior? Or were you thinking that maybe half the project could be senior and the other half could be the other plan that would be market rate and affordable?
Well, my thinking was the whole building would be senior, but the board could be open to that. My guess is if somebody's going to build it and they're going to,
kind of construction that they would do for senior.
Yeah, you're building it differently.
But there'd still be the requirement for the fair and affordable, big A, that would still be required by our code. It's multifamily and we require that they do that. But
yeah, I mean, I guess the question, do you then want to also give them, would you want the moderate income, moderate income bonus to apply to? Then you're talking about quite a bit.
Gigantic number of, right.
I mean, the point of the senior housing is effectively to make it moderate. So it seems like.
Yeah, but I think I'll have to clarify. I mean, if you want this, I'll have to clarify that the moderate income doesn't apply to senior housing. Does everybody agree with that?
Well, yeah, it's a thing to do both. I don't know how you do both. I mean, are you saying that maybe, Mark, you were assuming, or I'm assuming you're assuming that the senior construction of these senior units would not be as high-end, super expensive, and that they would by nature be less expensive or lower income. That's what the developer would aim at. Is that-
I'm just assuming that the market conditions would drive that. If they
Yeah,
actually
right,
were to
that's
have
what I mean.
senior housing that was at a rate that was, 150 AMI, that they wouldn't get a lot of seniors into it.
Right. So the question is, that would be an interesting question for a developer. Is that correct thinking? Or is that, I mean, I think-
DiNardo was aiming
Yeah,
at
exactly.
quote, unquote, empty nesters, and his
Right.
units were pretty huge and quite
and pretty
expensive.
high-end.
So
Yes, exactly. So that's why I think I have
And-
that in my head like you do, Deb, that.
And not built yet.
yeah, I know. Well, it's clearly a problem there, but
Really a problem with that high-end thing for those seniors.
One thing I just wanted
Or
to point
maybe
out,
not,
but
maybe it was just bad timing, who knows, but,
from my experience of knowing some, older folks in terms of older than myself, but like parent level, so 80s and such. One of the reactions is the ones I've talked to, and I talked to also my wife's parents. They don't like. They actually like to have communities that are senior, that aren't mixed age groups.
They
Because
like or they don't like?
They
They-
do like.
they
Yeah, I
like,
know.
There's a lot of stuff that you can give up, and there's a lot of hassles you can avoid if it's all like 55 or older. I'm not saying it should be 55. I'm just using that as an example of what's available that these other folks have talked to me about.
yeah, I've heard both, that the multi-generational feel is great. Having kids around outside is something that makes people feel, less isolated. But then I've heard exactly what you've
Well,
heard.
different strokes for different
Yeah,
folks.
and exactly.
Right, this is an
I would never
option.
want to be in an all senior,
Right.
but other people like it. I mean, so.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you want to have 5-year-olds running up and down the hallway, you can move into a building that's not a senior project. If you
But
want,
you may want the construction that's made that way, that's better for your physical needs and things, but you may like,
well, it's
I know, I'm just saying, assumptions are assumptions, and there are a lot of variety of what people need and want. So, but I certainly think, based on a lot of thought about senior issues, that to me, there's something pretty attractive about what Mary Ann is proposing here.
Now, does somebody raise, maybe it was David who raised, would it be a mix? Can you have a mix of, if you've got a building that's part senior and part not senior? Do you want that, or should we just leave it like this?
I think that gets very complicated.
I agree.
Because we talk about the different kinds of fixtures and hallway widths and all sorts of other things, and it goes right against what you were saying, that people will choose senior housing because they don't want to live in mixed
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah. All right. Okay, so I got the sense then it makes a big difference to know that there's somebody that can monitor this, so we can put those conditions in, as conditions for the special permit, but knowing that that'll be monitored. It's similar to as we have it in the affordable housing provisions. Okay.
And those would be things like you can't sell it to somebody. I don't know how many restrictions there'd be, but there'd be
Yeah, well,
some.
let me go through the restrictions, actually, that they have to be occupied by, okay. Dwelling units shall be occupied as a principal place of residence. I think you would want that.
Yes.
This dwelling unit shall not be occupied for seasonal use. Temporary visits shall be allowed regardless of age, but visits longer than 30 days. I didn't like that stuff.
No, I don't like that either.
You're-
And the occupied by seasonal use.
what-
I don't think that makes sense.
You come here for the ski season, right?
Right, okay. So just
Skiing
the thing
season.
about it has to be occupied as a principal place of residence. I think that's important. The Fair Housing Act stuff didn't really make much stuff. And then the rental dwelling units shall be rented for occupancy by written lease only to natural persons. I think that makes sense.
What does that mean again? Natural, what?
It has to be rented to Connie Kehoe. It can't be rented to.
Oh,
Or
LLC.
trust?
Yeah,
LLC?
or even to like maybe a company then that
That's
gives you
sub-
the apartment.
Corporate apartment.
And then that condominium or fee ownership shall not be permitted unless a homeowners association is formed capable of carrying out the responsibilities under this. I think that makes a certain amount of sense. That if it's a condo, they have to have an association that would make sure that it's being,
Isn't that always true?
Absolutely. Gotta have it.
You gotta do it, right?
There's that whole long filing process.
yeah, I don't know.
Nobody-
Leases and renewals shall not exceed 2 years in duration, and sublets or assignments shall not be allowed. I guess that's in there because I don't know, maybe
Well, that's how you regulate it, to keep it in
yeah.
Your
seniors.
hands. I mean, you'd find a subletter who's a senior.
As long as the tenant in actual occupancy remains eligible for occupancy and is complied with the terms of the lease or prior renewal, the tenant shall be offered a 2-year renewal of the lease. They shall, dwelling units permitted to be individually owned shall be owner occupied. I think all those things are pretty reasonable. And then I know Larry asked me about that priorities list. We don't want anything like that. The priority, the residents of Irvington, I don't think you want to get into that. Okay.
But are we sure we don't want to have moderate income?
Well, that was the question. If you add, you'd have to, how do you do that then?
I mean,
You
some
combine
limit,
the
but
two type of bonuses.
I mean, I don't know. You're just afraid that there's going to be
That's
too
the
many
point
units
Mark was making, that you don't really need to do that.
because they're going to be inexpensive to begin with.
Yeah.
I don't know that you can really count on that.
Well, what does the rest of the board think about it?
If they're rentals, I mean, we're assuming these are rentals, right?
And there's some pretty well-heeled seniors in Westchester who might be interested in moving to senior housing in Irvington. So I think it could be fairly expensive.
It's possible, but with the density numbers, the size of these units are going to be fairly small, which would sort of size them down a little bit. And, it's not like we're talking about DiNardo's 3,000 square foot.
Yeah, but the average size I had on them, Larry, if these buildings were built to the max, which they might not be, on Maxon would be the average size of a senior apartment would be 811 square feet. And the Carafiello building, 1,055. And then the two smaller buildings, 536 and 711.
But if a developer doesn't have to use an incentive, it's a senior housing, and he says, she says, I don't want to use that incentive. I just want to build very expensive senior housing. They could do that, right?
Yeah, we'd still have the capital A affordable requirement.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, they could, or they could build even fewer than the maximum and make them more luxurious. Those are just maxes.
Right. So that could happen.
But
May I ask a question? Would that be permitted?
Yes.
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
so as a problem. Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Go ahead, Karen.
Well, I'm just wondering, I think this, a senior development would make it more palatable to the community, but how could it increase diversity? And it was my impression that many of us wanted more diversity offered in housing.
Yeah, well, that's what we were saying. I mean, you can be senior and diverse, of course, but if they become luxury, that's why my questions were going in that direction. If the choice of the developer is to not make small units that would be fairly inexpensive, and says, oh, I'd rather build a few really expensive ones, then we've in a way shot ourselves in the foot. So I don't know the answer to that.
Well, then would it really be senior housing though? I mean, I guess maybe you define it as senior housing if they take advantage of the 2,000 density factor. And that by definition would lead to small units. So if they choose not to do that, they could still market it to seniors, but it wouldn't be our definition of senior housing. So then the moderate income density bonuses would still be available. So really it would only be defined, and the parking spots. So they have to, either they take the higher number of units and call it senior housing, or they don't, in which case the moderate income bonuses would still apply. And even if they wanted to market it to seniors, that's their prerogative, but
Oh, so I
but it wouldn't be so many.
saying you're making either option, you can't combine it. You can't say, I want half of this to be this and half of that to be that, but you could choose either column A or column B.
Right, so the parking and the density factors would go together, and that would define senior housing. In which case the units would be small, they'd only get one parking spot, and the developer couldn't charge high level, amounts. For lack of a better word.
Well, they could charge high level amounts. You
Right.
mean,
But they wouldn't get it, hopefully.
yeah, they probably wouldn't get it. Yeah. Okay, are people comfortable with that? Are people comfortable with not, about not including the moderate income density bonus on the seniors?
Yeah, I don't think you can do both, but
Right.
I don't know how to quite put Deb's thought, or maybe that was everybody's thought, but it just kind of clarified it more for me that the developer could either go, I want to do the senior thing, or I don't want to do the senior thing. And those are the two options for that developer for that property. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, but there's no reason that somebody couldn't just build a regular, at 3,000 square feet or maybe at 2,500 if you take the density bonus, and but design them, with walk-in showers instead of bathtubs and what other things seniors prefer.
Mhm.
Wider halls or whatever. There's nothing to stop them from doing that. Okay. All right. So I think that's it on that issue. Okay. Then the other big issue is whether you want to, besides allowing more units for the moderate income incentive, do you also want to allow the buildings to get bigger?
That was the picture from Ashley.
Yeah, they're a little bit tricky. She didn't give us exactly what we were looking for, but if you took, Larry, could you put the drawings up?
Sure.
And we're going to have to look at, we're not looking at the two smaller properties because they're built out. They can't get any bigger no matter what the coverage is, unless you have like 100% coverage or something. But so we'll look at the Maxon and the KEF is a Carafiello. separately, because different things on both of them. Now, if, okay, look at the, okay, this is confusing because not, okay, number 2 at the top there is the Carafiello one. And that striped area shows how big it could be right now. It would be that big times 3, up 3 stories. You see there's an issue there because part of it's within the 50-foot back, so maybe it would be set back further, but area wise, it would be like that times 3 at 20%, which is what's in the zoning right now. If you go to the next drawing, yeah, that's a 25%, and that shows, okay. Why does it say? Yeah, okay, and that's how big it would be if you allowed 25% building coverage. I can hardly tell the difference.
If you look at the roadway, you can tell the difference.
Here, let me,
That's really the
Yeah.
only way.
that's the first one. That's the second one.
Yeah, right, good.
This is like the eye
Good,
doctor.
Larry, good, good. First second.
Yeah, which is bigger, which is clearer, the first or the second. Okay. So if you allowed an extra 5% in coverage, it would be that big, that times 3. I mean, it could also be configured a little bit differently. Well, no, I mean, that would be the maximum because it can't cover more than that. And that would be just the building, not including driveways and stuff. So that's if you gave them a 5% building coverage bonus.
For moderate, we're talking about now, or for senior?
Yeah, so you're not only allowing them to have more units, you're allowing them to have up to 5% more coverage.
Is it possible for a developer to build multiple smaller buildings on
Yes.
these
Yeah.
lots?
But probably not cost effective.
I think some of the drawings she had done earlier, had more than one building, but yes, they would be.
As long as it's within the setback area.
What?
As long as it's within the setback area.
Yeah, yeah.
Divide it up as much as they want, but more buildings cost more money per unit.
If we're looking at the 25%, obviously you're adding stories as you increase the FAR, right?
Yeah, she said 3.
Both the store on both of these, this one and the previous one would be 3 stories. Would be 3 full stories. Because they can go much higher on FAR. They have a no. Their FAR would be higher. The limiting factor for them is coverage times 3. So that's as big as it could be, that times 3. Okay, then Larry, go to the next one.
I got a little confused with her stories being 3.23 and 4.
Right.
Well, okay. Then on this, okay, the 30% coverage, you wouldn't, I don't think you'd ever let the building coverage be 30%, but let's say you let the building, the building be 5% bigger. Do you also want to allow them more coverage, of driveways and stuff like that, or parking spaces or whatever? So then that's what 30% coverage looks like.
Well, it looks like on this one, they're cutting into the hillside.
You're right. Up that slope.
I mean, I don't know if it's unreasonable to say you can have the building can be 5%, you can go up to 5% on the building and that's it. Not also give them additional, ground coverage. but I guess maybe you'd need more parking spaces. I don't know.
Well, at that point, you've got quite a bit of overall coverage. You know, I don't know what an extra, you know, you have an extra, what, 10% on top of that for parking and driveways.
Well, that's a question. Do you also, do you want to also permit more car? I mean, you could permit extra building coverage only and not extra overall coverage. It's up to you. Does anybody have any thoughts?
Well, if you're talking senior, you need less parking.
Yeah, we said that, yeah.
I know, but then we're not talking about senior.
You're talking about moderate.
No, we're talking about regular apartment buildings that might be a little bit bigger because you're putting moderate units in them.
That's what I just said.
Yeah.
So my concern is just if you look at this and look at what it's going to end up doing in terms of either property, but where is the parking going now? You know, are we allowing parking in the buffer? Because if not, the entire building, the entire essentially flat building area of the lot is going to be, you know, impervious surface by the time we're done.
You're talking about this 30% one.
Yes.
Then Larry, why don't you go back to the 25%, the second slide.
You know, as it is, they're going to have a U-shaped driveway around it for fire access, right? And then they're going to have parking. So the way it is right now, there's parking that's in that 250-foot buffer in, you know, on the current site.
So the thing that I'm thinking about from this picture is that it seems like the rental units around here are more the garden apartment look. I mean, do people still find it attractive to buy within a 3-story building? I mean, it seems like, I know all the things that I think of as multifamily around here, they might have several stories, but they have more of a sense of it's not just one kind of monolithic building,
Hulking.
you know?
I mean, you could
No, I
develop
know,
that.
Connie, but you're right.
Yeah.
But with the coverage limits you've got,
No,
that's it. I mean, that's your trade-off.
oh, but who, does anybody want to buy that? I mean, yes, you'd like to, I mean, if they're moderate enough, I mean, it's certainly lovely to you know, to be here, and I don't know.
Well, the first thing you could do is split that building in half, move them apart, and have, you know, parking in between them, and
Yeah, well, yeah, I know.
like a garden apartment.
Connie, nobody's saying the building has to be configured like that. She was just trying to show what
Yeah.
25%.
A developer has to think about what people will buy on how they use the space they're allotted to use. And they don't want to build something that is not popular.
Well, Connie, I don't think anybody would be, any modern architect today would be building a cube.
Yeah, okay.
They would be making it look like it was townhouses, and the roof lines would change as it went up the hill, and there would be, you know, separate entrances where one might have a set of stairs going up.
Yeah.
So no, it's not going to be
Like a Soviet style block in East Germany or something.
No, and I think they would do it in more than one building too. They would either split the buildings or make a U shape or something like that.
But even if that meant they can't maximize every single inch, it would still not be worth it to try to do this. I get it. Okay.
So, Marianne, just refresh me. What is allowed in the buffer? Is parking allowed in the buffer or just driveway?
I like only driveways, Mark.
Yeah, I think that's the other constraint they're going to be coming up against. I don't even know if they're going to have enough room for, unless they want to pave everything over in that buildable area. I don't know if they're
Yes.
going to have enough room for everything, driveways, parking, all that kind of crap. But
Parking could be underground.
well, that's
potentially.
the preferred actually, but, and maybe this forces that, but the cost of that is what we've come against before.
So the parking lot
Parking
Carafiello isn't grandfathered?
What?
The parking at the Carafiello property, which is obviously in the buffer, that's not grandfathered in for a future owner?
I don't know.
I don't understand why it would be.
Not if they, I suppose if they were just leaving the thing as is, but that's pretty, I don't know. I haven't looked into that. We really we weren't really getting into design of the lots. I mean, I don't know how we do that. I mean, what we were looking at is parameters and limits.
And so this is driven by the fact that the density bonus would allow more units, but not allow those units to take more space. So it would really just force everything to be smaller within the same building envelope.
Yes. And somebody raised the point. I think it was the Maxon.
Yeah.
Raised that point. It's a good point.
Well, I think what this diagram shows is 5% is possible, but 10% is ridiculous.
Okay. Does everybody else feel comfortable with that? Connie,
I mean,
Brian?
5% feels big, but 10% definitely be too big, I think.
Well, are you okay with 5%?
Say what the point was again. I'm sorry, I got distracted for a second.
Are we happy with allowing the building to increase by 5% coverage if they were with more of the moderate income, right? Isn't that?
So and that's this picture compared to the 30 was the other picture. And that's the 10. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that would be if you allowed 10% bigger. Yeah.
Okay, so
Right now. It's
yeah,
20.
so this is better, obviously. Yeah, this middle one.
Larry Lonke, you comfortable with?
Yeah, I think I'm comfortable with 5.
Okay, Janice?
Yes,
I can't see you. You're not on my grid here. Oh, there you
Oh.
are. Okay. All right.
yes, the 5.
And
Okay.
I'd say 5 also.
Okay, so I'll write in a total of 5%. Okay, then for Maxon, we would have to look at FAR because they can't max out their coverage. Let me see. Okay, Larry, go to the first drawing. Yeah, 20% coverage. Now, the Maxon property, don't pay attention to the coverage here, pay attention to the FAR. And okay, Maxon is asking for a base FAR of 0.40. That won't affect any of the other properties, but the Maxon it would. Now, all the calculations we had done on Maxon maxed out at 0.45, excuse me, an FAR of 0.45. There was the base of 30 plus, and you could get an extra 10 if you're doing, something the village likes, and an extra 5, or up to 10% for maintaining a historic building, and up to 10%, for giving something to the, doing something that the village finds helpful. Good for the village, which would get them, but not greater than 45. So that would get them to 45. So it seemed like that would be enough. Their position is, and it probably goes to what you were saying earlier, Connie, is that they would want a base of 0.40 because of the base of 0.30, which is right now. They would be very, they'd be very restricted, so that they could have something this size, but only could be 1.5 stories. If it were this size, it could only be 1.5 stories at 0.3 FAR, if you look at the top then. Because their thinking was, well, maybe, maybe we want to develop this in a way that we're not going to be able to give something useful to the village. So we'll be stuck at 0.3, and that's too small. We need to be at 0.4. Okay, but assuming you wanted to do that, you still want to give them that 0.5 density, the density bonus. And, they can have a FAR of 5% bigger, to go with, as a counterpart to the 5% additional coverage. It could get 5% bigger. So that would bring them to 45. If you also wanted them to, or was trying to incentivize them to keep up the house, you'd have to go to 0.5.
Oh.
The house is 0.5, actually, is 0.05. So I just want you to, if you were going to go that way, what 0.5 FAR would be this, the shaded area number 1, all at 2.5 stories. Do you get me? So 2 stories, and the third story would be half the story.
The third story would what?
Be a half story. I mean,
Would be a half story. I didn't hear the word half.
half
So,
of it.
so
anyway, so those calculate, and the other 2 drawings are just way off. So that would be, I don't know if you, and there would be a building of 87,000 square. We've been calculating that their building could be as big as 78,000. We've been calculating the 0.45 FAR. So I don't know how you feel about that.
So this is all related to the incentives for moderate income.
Well, if you made the FAR, and I'm not, no, this is all related to their asking for the base FAR to be 0.4. If you allow the
base.
Yeah, whatever the base FAR is. Remember, now it's 0.3, but we got it up to 0.45 by adding, doing something for the village and keeping the mansion, okay? And okay. I don't know how anybody feels about that.
I don't know.
Well, that's what we were talking about before, that one of the things you balance out here, it could either not necessarily mutually exclusive, but we have a couple of things we want. One is more affordable units by various definitions, and one is the preservation of historical edifices and monuments. So if we want them to keep that building, something's got to give. And that would be allowing more coverage, right?
No, more FAR, bigger
More
building.
FAR, sorry.
But they get that if they keep the building, right?
Yeah, if they keep, but only if they keep.
Keep the building. Yeah, they would get the 0.5 FAR only if they kept the building.
Yeah.
So
And
that
if
seems
you
to be,
ups the basic FAR to 0.4.
So then we just give up on this, do something for the village thing, that just goes out the window?
Well, what they're doing is keeping the building.
Yes, which is obviously an incentive for us, but that was the other, was the developing it for a community center or something like that, I guess that was. So. All right.
Yeah, I guess
I think I get it. I mean, if we want to
lost
incentivize
now.
the
What's-
building, whatever that is, I don't know, just, I can't think anymore.
What are we trying to achieve here, Marianne? Can you go through it one more time? Because how do we change the FAR on this property and not change it on the Carfiella property as well?
Oh, because if you look at the numbers, it's kind of, I think it's going to be dizzying right now, but the FAR at 0.4 for Carafiello would be greater than the maximum coverage times 3 for them. So the maximum gross floor area is smaller than FAR, and you have to take the two. That you have to take the
That's where
smaller
that
two.
4.04 stories comes in.
Yeah. And actually related to that, just to make it clear, I separate than this, I added a provision that reads, where maximum FAR permits a larger building than does maximum coverage times maximum number of stories, or where maximum coverage times maximum number of stories exceeds maximum FAR, the smaller limit shall control.
So what are we trying to achieve here? If we give them, no, they already have 0.3, they can get up to 4.5, 0.45, right? With the existing whatever benefits, but so now we're saying we're going to end up giving them up to 5.5. It sounds
Well, that's what we're not saying it, we're discussing it.
I understand that. I'm just saying that what the proposal is would allow them to go up to 0.5.
Yes. You would take, if you started at 0.4, you would take out the thing about if the board determines that the proposed development would further an important public benefit, such as the provision of affordable housing beyond the village requirements or the provision of a sidewalk along Broadway. You take that out. They can't get the 10% for that. They were the only ones who would have benefited by that, because the others can't build as big as their FAR allows anyway.
And the reason they want that taken out is what?
Because they want to be, I think, although maybe we should ask them, they're probably there, but my thinking was that point, they want to be at 0.4 without having to do that. To get to 0.4, they would have to do what I just said about, providing an important public benefit. If they didn't want to provide the important public benefit, they just want to do the 0.4 building. But you might ask them to explain it if they're there.
And I note that there's a question and answer from Dave Smith asking to defer to a later date
For that discussion.
for being part of this discussion, and it might make sense to do that.
I think too, I kind of want to think about it. I think looking at the pictures help, but I think I need to think about it, and I'd like to hear.
Okay. Okay, so let's put this up. Is that just on the we're comfortable on the coverage thing, right? It's the Brian, are you saying that about the extra 5% for coverage, or?
I think the 5% is fine. I think.
Okay, it's just the FAR. Okay. Okay, think about that some more. And then, all right, hold on a sec. Okay, then, and I'm sensing that everybody's getting tired of this.
What else do you have yellowed out we need to discuss?
Okay, now we're down, we're to the moderate income, the question about the moderate income housing.
Which page are we on?
Okay, 15.
Larry, could you take down these illustrations now? Thank you.
He's in the hive.
And I said, well,
So we're using
before we get into the main questions about this, the way this is drafted, it would apply to all the multifamily developments, not just to this district. Are people comfortable with that? Sort of like the affordable housing one applies throughout the zoning code, and this would apply throughout the zoning code, although it would only apply to multifamily.
Well, I assume that, I forget the numbers now, are we actually ending up allowing them to build more than is extant, or are they already out, the existing ones are already built out pretty much?
Well, my guess is they're built out because remember, in all those districts, they've got a density factor of 5,000, and they're all way less. They were, I think, usually around 2,700. So I think they're built out.
So by saying it applies to everybody, it in practice wouldn't apply to them.
Well, it would if somebody on a new lot is building a new multifamily building.
I see. All right. That's okay. That's fine with me then. I mean, if somebody tore the whole thing down and started over again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but then they're bad, but they're not going to, because the current regulations are much more restrictive.
Right. That's right. You'd have to.
Than what they built under.
All right.
But it would apply to the DiNardo property, right?
Well, that not anymore, but because he already has
somebody
approval.
is going to come in with a new plan for that. This, if it is passed, would apply.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, and they.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an
Like
idea.
to save the historic building on that property.
We got no.
A little late.
Do that again. No, we can't.
Well, I mean, I can draft it so that it just applies to the North Broadway district if you're more comfortable with that.
I mean, I'm fine with it applying elsewhere, everywhere.
Yeah, no, but how
I
about?
think it's good policy.
I would just have to really,
I think I have to think about this more too.
Yeah,
look
I
at the
can't
property.
quite figure what would happen to our, yeah, I don't know. Ugh.
Okay, let me think too. Okay.
and I know this is not in the range of possibility at the moment, but the Nevis property, is that single family, or is there any multifamily zoning on that?
The Nevis property?
It's all single family, like.
No, isn't that one F80, Larry? I think it's 2 acre
80.
zoning.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
okay. I just wanted to be sure that I was remembering it correctly.
Larry, you were on mute. Did you agree?
No, I did actually come off mute. It was 80,000 square feet, 2 acres.
Yeah, 2 acre zoning.
Okay.
Um,
Modest little 2 acre house.
okay, so then, all right, well, okay, so then, do you have it in front of you? I mean, the next thing, go through the next one, the next change is, adding for purchase dwelling unit that's affordable to a household whose income doesn't exceed 120% of AMI and the annual. Now, I don't know, maybe let's leave it at 120%, and then Tom will run it past Wilder Balter, and we'll get
Okay.
another set. And if in the meantime, somebody else knows of some developer, they can run this past, that would be good. Okay. And then when you get to the rental units, the way I drafted it says a rental unit that's affordable to a household whose income doesn't exceed 100% of AMI. Now, I don't know, how do people feel about that? Whether you want to lower
I think we
it.
should run it, no, I think it should be run by Walter as well. And
Leave it
see-
at that and see what you learn.
Yeah, I think those should be our starter numbers and see if there's an argument for
Lower.
lower.
Okay.
Marianne, where are you reading that from?
On page 16 at the top.
It's highlighted in yellow.
No, I was just had scrolled past the top of the page.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right, and then discuss whether this incentive is too great. Oh, just by the way, on that density bonus, I'm gonna have to write it somehow so that the extra 20% ends up being an even number, because it has to be an even number. So round it down to the, even next even number. So, because you've got the 1-for-1, but then I guess the question is whether this incentive is too great, but again, let's leave it like this and see what the reaction is.
Okay.
Okay. Believe it or not, I think that's it. Let me just double check if I jumped over some other things before.
Well, I'm ready to sign a lease.
Okay, so I'll do another draft. Yeah, we'll still have some questions, they'll still have some questions, mainly on the FAR thing, I guess, and then we're still open on the numbers. Okay?
Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
So when are we going to have Dave Smith in?
I guess we'll just have him speak at the public hearing at the next meeting on Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah, is Dave still on?
When's
I
our
don't know
next?
if I don't know if he's David or not, but Dave Smith, if you're still on, it's actually, our meeting's on the 21st because of Martin Luther King Day, which is a Thursday. So it's kind of a strange date. Or maybe Larry, maybe you could shoot him an email just to make sure he knows.
Yeah, I'll reach out.
They'll get the agenda anyway, so.
Oh, it's funny. I didn't even put the date in. It's Thursday, the 21st is our meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Okay, so I think, yeah, even though the new draft will have questions in it, I think I better do a new draft, because there are some things we agreed on tonight, like the, the senior housing and putting some restrictions in there and a couple of other things. Okay.
Good.
Okay,
Okay. All
that's
right.
it, everyone. Larry Lonkey, are you feeling better?
Somewhat. Back to work.
Back to work.
Oh, okay. Then you don't. Okay.
All right. So we're done with our meeting
Which
now?
is clearer, number 1 or number 2?
Yeah, I guess I'm done. Okay.
We're
So,
done.
Larry, we have a separate dial-in, correct?
Yes. So you're going to adjourn to executive session?
Yep. I'm going to make a motion to adjourn to executive session regarding police
Then I
personnel.
assume you don't need me for it.
No, we don't.
We do not. Have a good night.
Okay, bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Hey, good night.
So
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mary.
number to call in, Larry?
Yes, it was, oh, I'm not sure.
I
I'll
didn't
send
see
you,
it.
I'll send you an email right now.
Oh, good.
Perfect. Thanks, Larry. See you in a
Yep.
minute.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Bye.